Hi, welcome to the Data Engineering Bootcamp. This is going to be a great session where we're going to walk through Python data engineering in Snowflake. My name is Jeremiah Hansen, and I'm on our field CTO team here at Snowflake, focused on data engineering. And I have with me Vino as well.
Thanks, Jeremiah. Hey, everyone. I am Vino. I'm a developer advocate at Snowflake, focused on all things data engineering. And I'm excited to do this bootcamp with you all today. Let's, dive right in. Before we get started, there is a bit of housekeeping in here. If you must have already received an email or a note on the prerequisites, please check if you have a Snowflake account. If not, create a Snowflake free trial account before we get started. And you should also have a GitHub account to be able to successfully run through this bootcamp. Please do so if you don't already. And these are instructions. We have a quick start ready to go for the contents of the bootcamp. And again, just check once, log into your GitHub account, Snowflake account, and also create your first database in Snowflake. You have all the detailed instructions for you ready to go. Now, just to give you an overview of what to expect for this, we would probably have about 5 minutes of overview on what data engineering is, what the flow of the presentation, or the bootcamp is going to be. And then right after 5 minutes, you would dive right into actually building your data engineering pipelines in Snowflake. Well, when we talk about data engineering, I know it can sound complex, but essentially we could simplify this into 3 core stages, right? You have your data coming in from different sources, which is raw, which is not transformed, is not really available for your business teams to consume and make meaningful sense out of it. But then in the transformation stage is where you're cleansing, integrating, and curating it in a way that is meaningful for your business teams. And of course, in the consumption layer, you could be using these data for different use cases like machine learning, analytics, AI, and just simple dashboarding and whatnot, right? But essentially, data engineering is ingesting data from different sources and transforming it and really giving it to consumption for different use cases and business teams down the line. Very simple, but if we just think about it, there's raw data coming in, and then we are transforming it into a cleansed, more meaningful way for people to consume downstream. But sometimes when you do read up about these data engineering terminologies, you might come across this medallion architecture. There is bronze and silver and gold. I really don't want you to sort of get really boggled by all of these terms out there. Just think of, you have raw data coming in from different sources, and we need to transform it so the business teams downstream are able to make meaningful, value and insights out of it. And that's it. That's exactly what we're going to do today in the bootcamp. And before that, let's dive into what data engineering looks like in Snowflake, right? Remember, raw to transformed is all we're trying to do. But to do that, we have these different tools and features available in Snowflake, right? For ingestion, you could work with structured, unstructured data, batch or real-time streams coming in from different applications. All of that could be ingested into Snowflake through OpenFlow or other different ingestion options that you have available. And for transformation, again, you have SQL and Python variants. Pick your tool of choice, and then you can use those tools to really transform your data. And for delivery, you could either share the data sets with your other teams internally and externally, use it for AI workloads, and really build apps and whatnot on top of it. But this entire data engineering workflow can be automated in a more streamlined manner. So we have Git integration, essentially, and you also have notebooks and workspaces to work with your data, integrated development environments, tasks to periodically schedule them, and also Snowflake Trail for logging and observability and whatnot. So this is a quick snapshot of what data engineering looks like in Snowflake. But the focus of today's lab is going to be about using tasks and notebooks to write and schedule your data pipelines. And we will use Snowpark DataFrames for transformation and for ingestion as well. Well, with that said, enough talking. Let's dive actually into the hands-on portion of it. And for that, Jeremiah, take it over.
Perfect. Thanks, Vino. And thanks for the overview. That's great. Yeah, like she said, we have a broad set of features in Snowflake. And today we're really going to focus in on Python and how we do that with notebooks. So if you haven't already opened up the quick start, we're going to do everything today from the quick start. So this will be the last slide. And I'll actually flip over right now to the quick start. All right, so here is the quick start. we're going to go through this in detail today, and you'll have this as a reference. So if you, at any point in this, if you get behind, don't worry about it. Just follow along with what I'm doing, or watch along, and then you can go back and do it. But I'm going to walk us through the steps. In the first step, it's just an overview of the quick start. The prereqs, though, that we have asked to do beforehand is to have a Snowflake account set up, and you'll get an email which you need to respond to, and then have your GitHub account set up. So those are the prereqs that you'll need to have before we get going. But let's actually go, we'll start on step 2, which is the quick start setup. You might have, if you've already done these steps, great, just watch along. But if you haven't, we want to give you a chance to try to do them with us here. So the first step in GitHub is we're going to create a personal access token. And the way you do that is I've got my GitHub account open over here. You go essentially in the top right by your profile, and you click on settings. And within settings, there's a bunch of items. At the very kind of bottom left navigation under developer settings, that's where you want to go. Then you're going to find personal access tokens, and we're going to create essentially the classic token for now. So you can see I've got a few. Go ahead and under generate new token, generate a new classic token. Give it whatever name you want here. The default expiration is good. And then what you want to make sure you select is repo. And this will select all the boxes underneath. And essentially we're giving access to our repositories. And then scroll down and click on generate token. I'm not going to actually click it so you don't see my token, but go ahead and do that. The thing to do here though is make sure that you save the token. As soon as you go off this, like with most tools, as soon as you go off the page, you will no longer be able to see that token again. You have to create a new one. So save that in a notepad or somewhere on your computer, and we'll use it in a couple steps here. All right, so that's the first bit. All right, the next step is we're going to fork the repository. So click on the link. This will open up the official repository for this quick start. And you can fork it by right here near the top. There's a fork button. If you click on that, you can fork it into your GitHub account. So it'll show you as the owner. Just keep the same name. Keep all the settings the same, and go ahead and create fork. And what this does is creates a fork of the repository in your account so that we can make some changes and edit it. All right, so there's our GitHub, our forked GitHub repository. And this also gives you a copy of all the code, so you can access this and work with it. So going back to the quick start, we need to create a dev branch. And what we're going to do for that is essentially it's pretty easy. Here at the top where it shows the branches, we can create a new branch. So a couple ways to do it, but if you just type the word dev in here, you can, it'll say create branch dev from main. So let's do that. Now we've got 2 branches. So we've got a development branch that we're going to work in. That's good. The next thing we just set up is GitHub Actions. So this is the CICD component of GitHub. And to do that, we click on the Actions tab. It's the 3rd tab from the top. And the first time for a repository, you just need to say you understand and to enable. And what we're going to do is we're actually going to go through and create, we need to set up I'll show you back here. Go back to the quick start. We're going to go through and actually create some secrets. And then we're going to create, looks like 7 secrets. So what we'll do is we'll keep the 2 tabs open. We're going to go in under settings. So if you look at the top tab here, we're going to go down under secrets and variables in the left nav. And then under actions. These are secrets that are set up for GitHub Actions. It's beyond the scope of this to get into. There's more advanced, better ways to manage environments with GitHub. We're going to keep this really simple and just use repository secrets for now. So you create a new repository secret. And what I'll do is, what I recommend you do is just copy and paste. So copy and paste Snowflake account. And in here, put your values. So put your demo account, the identifier for your account in here. And then we'll click add secret. And we're going to go through and do this for all of these, all 7 items. So go ahead and do it one at a time. So I did Snowflake account. The next one, the user, and I'll just, for now, I'll put these in after. I'll just put a value in here for now. But you put your real value in. Snowflake password is the third one. So we're just copying and pasting here. Put your password in. Next, the role, Snowflake role. These last four, you can use the exact values that I've specified because we're going to create all of these objects. So for the demo, the Snowflake role, you want to actually use the demo role. So here we're just going to copy and paste both the name of the secret and the secret itself. So demo role. Almost done. Snowflake warehouse. Oops. Let's go back and we'll put that in as well. And this will be used, all these secrets are going to be used in the GitHub Actions pipeline so that we can connect to Snowflake and deploy our code. So we'll keep going. Two more, Snowflake database and Snowflake schema are the last two. So I'm creating that one and then demo DB. Okay. And one more. Almost there, Snowflake schema. So let's go ahead and create that. One more secret with integrations as the value. Okay. So we've got all of our secrets now. We've got GitHub Actions enabled. We should be, when we get to this step, that should be all set up and ready to go. That's the last part of this step 2. All right, step 3. We're going to actually upload a notebook that's in the repository that's going to help us get with the demo. So go out to your GitHub repository. If you're still on the actions page, click on, or your settings page, click on code, kind of at the top left, and this will open up the code. There's a notebook here called 00 start here. So click on that. And then once the notebook loads, you'll see it here. You can click on the download raw file button. Just right here at the top right of the file. So click that. This will download the IPYNB file to your just local computer. And then go over to Snowsite, and we're going to open up the notebook section. So here in the Snowsite navigation, if you're logged into your account, if you click on projects and notebooks, you'll come to this notebooks page. And it should be empty for you. I've got one notebook in here at the moment. Click on, up here, we can click on import from, so plus notebook sign, we can click on import IPYNB file. And what you want to do here is select in your downloads, select that file. And we'll just call it start 00 start here. Choose your database. So it needs to have a database to store this in. In the instructions, we tell you to put it in a test DB, to create a test DB database. We'll put it there, and we'll have a sample warehouse to work on. Okay, so that's our first notebook. And then the last step we need to do, if you go back to the instructions, we've got it in there, is we need to make sure we just set up the packages. So if you come into here, under packages, right now we have no packages associated with it, but we want to install the Snowflake. It's called just Snowflake. And this package gives you a lot of the Snowflake libraries. So if we click on that, and it will say the latest version, just click save. And so now at this point, we've got the notebook set up. The last piece is to actually run step 3 in the notebook. So what you're going to do here is you're going to replace your username and password with your GitHub values. So if you come to your GitHub, you can kind of see it all in the URL. So actually copy, if you go back to your notebook at the repository itself, just copy your username. And you can see that in the URL. It's the first part. For me, it's this SFC GHJ Hansen, but copy yours. And replace where it says username here, replace just the username. This will make it easier for you so you don't make any copy paste errors. So you've got your username, and these 3 things are all set correctly. As long as you named the forked repository the same, this will work. And then in your personal access token, go ahead and replace this with the value that you've saved off in your notepad. All right, and then go ahead and click start on the notebook itself. And once it starts, we're going to run, and it's already started up, we're going to run these 4 cells. So this first one, go ahead and click run. And then down here now, I won't run these at the moment because I didn't put my password in, but run this cell, this next cell, which creates the bunch of objects, and then this final cell here. So everything down to step 4, run those. Okay, and that should all run successfully. And now we've got through step 3, and we're ready to actually get into the meat of the quick start. Now that we've got the setup steps done, let's get into the actual quick start. So the first step here is we're going to run through and deploy our dev notebooks. And let me just really quickly walk through what we're going to do in this quick start. So I think it helps just to kind of have in your mind the overall process that we're going to go through so that as we get into it, you know what part we're on and where it fits. So here's an overview visually. We're going to start with step 4, we're going to start by actually deploying the notebooks, which we have 2 notebooks we're going to deploy. And the first one is a notebook that's going to ingest data. So if you remember back to what Vino went through with our ingestion and transformation, we're going to take data from Excel, and we're going to read those Excel files from a stage in Snowflake and actually load them into these 2 tables, location and order detail. Then in step 5, we're going to actually take data from our share of the Snowflake marketplace. And this is a really powerful feature in Snowflake that lets you access data sets from other publishers directly and not have to ETL them yourself. So we're going to take some weather data from that. We'll do that together. And then we're going to have a second notebook that actually does some transformation of the data and aggregates it, creating a final daily CICD metrics table. And then in step 8, we're going to go through and we're going to actually create the tasks. And I'll show you how to do that through Python. And then we're going to actually go and deploy all this through a GitHub Actions pipeline. So that's what we're going to do in this throughout the whole rest of the quick start. But starting in 4, we need to deploy the notebooks first. So flip back to your 00 notebook that you have open. We're going to pick up here on step 4. And what we're going to do is, you notice when I opened up those notebooks, if I go back to the notebook tab here, we only have this one notebook deployed right now. I have another one here, but you might only see one notebook, 00 start here. We need to deploy the dev version of our 2 notebooks. So if you haven't already, go ahead and start the notebook. We're back in the 00 notebook here. And this is going to take a second to start. It'll start the warehouse that you've specified, and it will also start the notebook process. And one thing I love to point out, you saw here, if you were paying attention, that took about 5 to 10 seconds for that to start up. That's pretty amazing. If you've worked with other Spark-based notebook services, that creating that cluster and actually starting up the notebook can take 3 to 5 minutes, which is a huge amount of time to sit there and wait. And with Snowflake, since we run on the Snowflake warehouse, our warehouses start up in most cases sub-second. And then it takes a couple seconds to actually start that process that the notebook runs on within that warehouse. And you saw that just took a few seconds. And now we have an active running notebook on the Snowflake warehouse. So that was really fast. We'll scroll down here to that step 4 sections and go ahead and start this process. So we've got, you'll see here in this SQL cell, go ahead and run this. And what we're going to do here, what this is doing, I'll explain as this is running. There's a couple of features here that are actually at play that I want to explain. And as I go through this, these different features that I'm showing you are going to be different tools that you'll have available to you. So you can see how they're all used in this example, but you can take these pieces and use them individually. So for example, what I'm doing here is I'm running this command execute immediate from, and it's actually it's running a script from our Git repository. So if you look here in this, this is the Git repository we created at the beginning. And also it's passing some variables. So to this script, the SQL script, I'm passing some development labels. So an environment and a branch. And what this did is actually this execute immediate from command takes a SQL script and executes it. And that SQL script, like I'm showing here, can be in a Git repo or it can be in a stage. And so just to show you this Git repository, let's open up in another tab, the Database Explorer. So I'm just over here in the left navigation. Under Horizon Catalog, I'm opening up the Database Explorer, and I'm going to do that in a new tab. And I'm going to switch roles here to my demo role, which you have created as well. And we have this demo database. And this is what was created as part of that initial setup script. Here in the integration section, I've got a Git repository. And within that Git repository, if I click on that, I can actually browse my Git repository here within Horizon Catalog. That's what the Snowflake Git integration enables you to do. If you look here, I'll actually open up my GitHub account. So I have that here in another tab. And these are the same files. So what you're seeing here in the GitHub repo is the same as you're seeing through Snowsight. And what I want to point out here is there are two notebooks. So this is how you store your notebook in your Git repo. So in this notebooks folder, I've got two subfolders, 06 and 07. These are the two different notebooks. And within these folders, there's actually two files. There's a IPYNB file, which is your standard notebook file. And there's an environment YAML file that defines which packages the notebook needs. So that's what makes up a Snowflake notebook in source control. And let's show you as well that script that I ran. So if I'm showing you here in GitHub, if you look in the scripts folder, there's this deployed notebook script. And you can see what's involved here. This is actually running the command create or replace notebook. And then it's using, you see these like curly braces in here. If you haven't seen this before, this is called Jinja, and it's a templating language for Python that's pretty popular. If you've ever used DBT, this is a common feature in DBT and other tools as well. And it lets me basically put these variables or these placeholders in my code. So what's going to happen is those, in the case where I pass the dev values, are going to be put in here in the name of the notebook. So I'm creating two notebooks based off of those files in my source control, in my repo. Okay, so now that we've kind of explained the Git integration and all that, if I come back here and I now go to my notebooks, so let's go back here to notebooks. So open that up. You see now I've got two notebooks. They start with the letters, with the word dev, and I have 6 and 7. When we're done here, we're going to actually have the prod versions as well, but we've done that. And we deployed that actually through this notebook through running this execute immediate script. Okay, so that's one tool for you to keep, put in your tool belt, have available. Now, the next step, if we go back and look at let's scroll up here. And let's actually pull up. I'm going to zoom in on this. So we've done the initial step of basically creating the environments and the Git repo. That was step, in this kind of initial step 4. Now what we want to do is actually create the share. So sharing in Snowflake is really important. So if I needed weather data in this example, what I can do is actually go out, and I'll do it here. I can go to the marketplace. Let's open up the left navigation bar. If you click on marketplace, and let's search in here for the word frostbite. Frostbite with B-Y-T-E. And you'll see that there's a data set here called weather source frostbite. And this is essentially a sample data set that our friends have provided for us. They also sell in the marketplace a full weather data set. But the marketplace lets you search and discover data that's available and other applications. And I can access this. This is a free one. So I can access it just by clicking on this blue get button. And what I'm going to do here is under the options, I'm going to change the name. So if you go back to your 00 notebook, it says here the name specifically you want to use, and it's frostbite weather source. And this is important because, let's see, here we go. The code later expects to find the notebook name to be a particular thing. So let's come into here and let's name it, instead of the default name, we're going to call it frostbite _ weather source. So all I need to do is essentially click change, and I could have kept the default name. So you could, with one button click, have had this set up. I had one extra step in between. But now I actually have this available, and it shows up as a database in Snowflake called Frostbite Weather Source. And this is pretty amazing. So now I have, with that one step, I can actually, if I go back into Horizon Catalog here, and you can see if I, right here, Frostbite Weather Source, I actually have now these views available to me to query in real time. And anytime that the source data updates, it's immediately available to me. So this is really powerful. The data sharing capability in Snowflake is awesome. And as you're starting to build out solutions, look at what's available there and see if you can take advantage of that. So that's the step 5 was essentially just the data sharing. So now I've got that available to me. And what we want to do next is, in step 6, is actually run our first notebook and load that Excel data into those tables. So let's go do that right now. So open back up your notebooks under Projects, Notebooks. I created a shortcut here to make it easier to get to. And what we'll do this time is open up the 06 notebook. So dev 06 load Excel files. And I'll close the nav bar here so we can see that. Now, a couple things to point out. So let's start the notebook. So click Start Session at the top. And again, this will take a small amount of time to load up and actually connect to the warehouse. And once this runs, I'm going to have everything run, but I'll show you a few things that are important about our Git integration. So when you're working with notebooks, since I created this notebook from a Git repository, like we talked about a second ago, you'll see now that over here on the left, I see some Git integration features, like the branch that I'm part of. I can pull recent changes. In the top right here, I can push to Git. So we'll do that later, or I can make a change and actually push that into my Git repository. But those features will show up when you have your notebook connected to a Git repo. And then what this is going to do, both notebooks are going to work the same. We're going to essentially have a query at the top that selects the current database and schema. What I'm going to do to show, this is something that most notebooks support. So if you've worked with notebooks in the past, this won't be a surprise to you. But I can actually access the results of previous cells within other cells. So here you can see in this second one, I'm calling cells.sql get context. And that's basically selecting the results from this prior cell. And I'm taking the database and schema name. This could be passed in as a parameter or other ways to the notebook to make it, to parameterize it. I've just done that with a simple kind of hard-coded query there. But we're going to set up our logging. We're going to get our Snowpark session, which is like your Spark session. And then we're going to do some set up the logging. So all of that is the kind of header. And then what we're doing here in this notebook is we're going to load those 2 Excel files. So again, I put a note in here. This is a temporary solution. I'm just selecting from the hard-coded query, but the path to these Excel files. A better way to do this would be to store it in a metadata table and actually just query the table directly. I didn't do that in this case just because I wanted to keep it simple, but you could definitely make this better that way. But I just have essentially the 2 Excel files I want to load. Now, as we come down, let's look at this next example. I'm creating a function. So again, this is about doing data engineering in Python. So I've got a Python function that is actually using the OpenPyXL library. So this also shows that we can use standard libraries that are available in Python. And we can support bringing custom libraries and all of that. That's not a problem. So in this case, I'm using OpenPyXL. And what I'm going to do is essentially I pass in the path to it. I'm going to read that Excel file, convert it to a data frame, and then this last line here on 22 is actually saving that data frame as a table in Snowflake. And then, so with that, and this is a reusable function that I can use for multiple Excel workbooks. And then lastly, down here, I'm just looping through all of the rows from a previous cell. So this is the cells SQL get spreadsheets, and calling that Python function. So let's go ahead and run that. Go ahead and click Run All at the top. And this will go through and run all these things. This will run very quickly. You can see it's pretty much finished. It's going through and actually processing them now, and we've finished. So at this point now we have, and if I open up the database tab, so over here on the left, we're showing the files in the notebook that make up the notebook, but I can also click the database tab. And let's look at the demo database in our dev schema. And you can see now we have two tables, location and order detail. And you can see the number of rows. The Excel files have just a sample set of data. So I got 100 rows there and 4 rows there. But we've created those dynamically from this Excel or from this notebook using Python with these open libraries reading this stuff. So pretty powerful. And that gives you a pattern that you can follow for other types of sources that you have that may not be directly supported in Snowflake, like CSV and Parquet. Maybe there's custom file formats or Excel that you can, through Python, load those in and process them. So pretty powerful capability. All right, so with that, now we have step 6. We've gone through and we've run the first notebook and loaded it into the tables. The next step is we're going to look at our second notebook where we're going to do some data transformation work. So this first step was data ingestion, and we talked about kind of Vino went through the 3 phases of data engineering. The second step now is going to be about transforming data. This is where we're going to leverage DataFrames, Python DataFrames. So if you've worked in Spark at all, you've most likely used PySpark and done transformation work in DataFrames, and we support that same API in Snowflake with Snowpark. So we're going to take that, we're going to combine data from those 2 tables we created and from the weather, and we're going to create this daily city metrics table, which is an aggregated table that we're going to use for analytics. So to do that, let's go back to our notebooks. This time I'm going to click this notebooks link at the top, and that'll take me back to my notebooks. And we're going to open up dev07. And for this notebook, this top parts are the same. So I won't go through and re-explain, the things are the same. We have the same basic header where we set the context and do all of that. What I want to talk about here is a couple things. So we actually have a Python API, which we call the Snowflake Python Management API. And this allows you to do all of your basic Snowflake object management directly in Python. So for example, traditionally what you might do is session.sql. And this works in Snowflake. You can do session.sql, and we could select to see if a table exists in the information schema. So that might be one way that we check to see if a table already exists. And this works in Snowflake. You can absolutely do session.sql. But if you want to do it in a pure Pythonic way, that we have another example here that shows how to do that. And so this is basically looking to see if a table exists. But through this management API, you can click on the link and explore that. This also gives you the ability to actually create objects, update objects, delete them if you need, or drop them if you need. So it's a full API for managing everything in a Pythonic way. All right. Then the core logic is here in this cell. And this is, like I said, if you've used Spark and PySpark with the DataFrame API, this is going to be the same API and very familiar. So I'm basically taking all those tables that I've created, I'm joining them together, and then I'm doing an aggregation. So I'm grouping by a couple columns, and then I'm aggregating the data and selecting the resulting columns. So pretty, it's kind of simple thing. It's a 3-table join with some aggregations. Then at the bottom, though, I've got some additional logic. So if the table doesn't exist, I'm going to actually create a new table and overwrite it. If the table does exist, then I'm going to actually run a merge command. So this is another feature I wanted to highlight that we support with our DataFrame API, the merge command. And this is very powerful because this gives you a true incremental pipeline. So while we're working with small data sets here, this approach would scale much beyond the small data sets, and really a best practice for all you data engineers out there is to always process data incrementally. You never want to have your default be to process all your records every time, because at some point that doesn't scale. You get to a certain number of rows and that becomes too much to do all at once, and you're doing all that over and over again. So The goal should always be incremental, and this gives you a pattern that you can follow for how to, using Snowpark, how to do that incrementally. All right, so go ahead and run all on this one. And while that's running, should just take a second. Again, this is a small number of records, so okay, that's finished. Let's look at again, go back to our databases. We'll refresh. We should now see a third table. And there we go, order detail. This has just a couple rows in it. Data seed metrics table has 2 rows. That's correct. Like I said, this is a very small data set. When it's aggregated, it just rolls up to 2 records. But you can kind of see now the whole process there. So that shows you the DataFrame API in Notebooks. All right, let's go back and look here. So now we've created our 2 notebooks. We've done our ingestion of data. We've done our transformation of data. Now we're going to get into a little bit more on the operational side. How do we actually take these notebooks that we've created, and how do we schedule them with tasks? And then how do we automate the deployment of that? So let's drill into that. In terms of scheduling, let's come back to the tab. If you have multiple tabs open, come back to your tab that has that 00 start here notebook. And we're going to go down. We've done steps 6 and 7. We're going to go down to the orchestration section. So I've talked a little bit about some of the Python APIs that we have available. We went through and we've looked at the management API, where we were able to check to see if the table existed. And we also went through and with the DataFrame API, we were able to transform data. What I'm going to show now is actually what we call the task DAG API. And that just stands for the DAG stands for directed acyclic graph. That's a term that's pretty common in the software industry to describe the relationship of objects to each other. So in this case, it's going to be the relationship of tasks in Snowflake to each other. It lets you do that in a powerful way. And so what this API allows is to manage all of your tasks in Snowflake, but at a higher level. And I'll show you how this works. This is really powerful. And this all is built around tasks. So if you're not familiar in Snowflake, tasks is how you do orchestration. You may have heard of orchestration tools like Airflow or Prefect or Dagster. Those are kind of some standard popular orchestration tools. Well, Snowflake has its own native orchestration tool called Tasks. And for many scenarios for customers, that it's a great option because you can do it all in Snowflake and not have to stand up an additional service. And what we have here in the Task DAG API is that same ability to manage tasks, but at a higher level. And it's actually based off the Airflow API, Python API. So if you've used Airflow before, this will be familiar. And let's actually go through and run these cells. So the first one just sets up some context and variables. Let's run, yours will actually look like this. So let's run the dev schema first. We're going to run this twice, but the first time we want to run with the dev schema. And then this final cell, this third one, this actually creates the DAG. And just to show you how this works, again, this is modeled after the Airflow API. But what I can do is I create essentially the DAG operation object, and then I create a DAG. And the DAG itself is defined by a number of attributes, a name and a warehouse. Within that, I define the tasks, and these are DAG tasks, which essentially, if you look at the definition of them, is really straightforward. It's just running execute notebook. So this is important to point out. When we're operationalizing the execution of notebooks in Snowflake, we can do it all through SQL, and that's just with the execute notebook command. And that's what this is doing, is running for each task, it's running execute notebook. And then down here, the second part is you define the relationships. So you use the bitwise operator in Python to define these relationships. I'm just saying there's a dependency between the tasks. And then I did the DAG operation. I did a deploy with my DAG, and that will actually create everything for me. So with just a little bit of Python that you can manage this, I've now deployed all of my tasks. And let's go out and look at that. So if I come in here back into the database, this is in Horizon Catalog, the Database Explorer. And if I hit refresh here, you're now going to see tasks show up. And so I've actually now deployed this task DAG. And let's actually open this up. We'll open it in a new tab. We were still inside the notebook here, but let's open up in a new tab. And what I want to show you here in the Explorer is there's a whole bunch of details in Snowsight about tasks. So we've opened this up. I can see attributes about the particular task. This one you'll see is just a dummy task. The DAG API creates this one so that you can have multiple, at the first level, you can have multiple tasks run at the same time. And if we look at the graph, it'll be a little more clear. So I can click on the graph tab. And you can see here, let's zoom in a little bit. I've got this essentially a kind of a root node, but then I've got my two tasks I created. So there's the load Excel files and the load daily city metrics. And let's actually, while we're waiting here, let's just kick off this DAG API. So let's start it up. It'll just take a second to run, but let's let that happen. And just to show you again how this works. So here's the Excel files one. You can see the definition that was this, and this was the Python API that did all this for us, but it essentially created a task. And the SQL for that task was execute notebook. And this is the dev version of these tasks. So all of that I did through that bit of Python code. So that's pretty powerful. If I go back now and I look at the run history, you can see that run succeeded. If I go down to this particular object, this task succeeded as well. So I can see over time as I'm running these, I can see the history. If there's failures, I would see those in red. I can see the one I just ran as well. So that's kind of the integration built into Snowflake for tasks and how that DAG API works. All right, hopefully that's helpful. That's how you orchestrate and how you can start doing some observability. Now, the next step we want to get into is looking at how GitHub Actions, how we can automate the deployment of this. So let's make a change. Let's go back here to one of our notebooks. We can, if we have 07 open, we can use this one. Let's just in the bottom cell make a change. Let's take this comment out. So just remove those two comments. I can run it to make sure it works. This would be an example. So say you're making a change to a notebook. You go ahead and you add your cells. You have it all ready to go. And now you want to check that change in. You can see with our Git integration that I clicked on the Files tab here. You can see that it's actually showing this notebook is modified. And what I can do then, if I want to push this change, is I can, up here in the top right where it says push to Git, let's go ahead and push this into our Git repository. One nice thing we have here is we've actually built a visual diff tool for the actual notebook itself. Notebooks, when they're stored, are actually stored in JSON. And looking at the raw JSON diff is a huge pain. And so we've had this nice feature where we'll actually show you visually which cells changed, and then you can see the actual change. I just removed the comment from this one cell. So that's super nice. And then let's go ahead and commit this. Okay. And I need to put, what you'll do is the first time that you're running this in Snowsight for the notebook, it'll ask you for your name and it'll ask you for your personal access token. So I'm going to go ahead and grab my personal access token here and I'll stick this in. Okay, so we'll put that here. Once you do that, you go ahead and click push. And this is going to push the change into my dev branch for this particular notebook that I've built here inside of Snowsight. So this feature is very important. Customers have, for a long time wanted Git integration within Snowsight to be able to edit objects, and notebooks were the first object that we supported this with. And so being able to check that in directly in Snowsight, you can do all of your development work for notebooks here. All right, now let's go out to GitHub. And what I'm going to show here now is a simple workflow. If you're working with your DevOps teams or building this, it's going to be more, you're going to have more gates and more process around this, and that's okay. But let's go and let's switch branches here to our dev branch. And we're going to see that we have a change. here, and we can actually, let's do just a simple pull request. And again, this is all in the step-by-step guide. Everything I'm showing you here is detailed there. We don't want to push it back to the main source repo. For now, we're going to keep it within our same repository. We're just going to push from the dev branch into the main branch within our forked repository. So make sure you change that setting here. That can throw people off. And we'll just keep all the default bits. Usually you'd put a good description in. But you can see down here, this is why I've mentioned looking at the diff visually as better than looking at the code. Because you can see here, this is actually the JSON that's being changed. And here you can see that we just removed that one comment. But when you have a lot of changes, this is a hard view to actually see what's happening. But let's go ahead and create that pull request. And again, you're going to have, your teams are going to set up a much more robust process here for how this works and how it, what other checks you have in the deployment process. But imagine we've gone through, we've done our reviews, we're all good. Let's merge that pull request. So I'll confirm that merge. And what will happen now is this is actually going to start up a pipeline, a CICD deployment pipeline behind the scenes. And while that's happening, let me walk you through what it does, how it works. So for GitHub, for GitHub Actions, the workflows are stored in this .github workflows folder. And we have this deploy demo objects. And again, this is all provided to you in the repository. But in here, I've got my GitHub Actions pipeline. So if you're a customer that is working in a tool other than GitHub, if you're working in, say, Azure DevOps or Jenkins, the translation of this definition of this workflow to your different tools is pretty straightforward. A lot of the tools, like Azure DevOps, for example, uses YAML as its definition as well, the language, and it's pretty similar. There's some slight differences, but this will translate pretty easily. So for GitHub Actions, the idea is, and this is, again, a simple example, but whenever we push to the main branch, we're going to kick this off. And what's going to happen is it's going to go through a few steps. It's going to it's going to check out a repository. It's going to set up Python. It's going to install any required packages. In this case, it's the Snowflake CLI that's going to be installed. And then we're going to go through and actually run the deployment command. And so we're going to deploy the notebooks. And the way we do that is we're running the Snowflake CLI tool. So something else to be aware of, it's important. Our Snowflake CLI tool is our developer tool going forward that we will be putting a lot of effort into, a lot of features into to help developers. So it helps you with the building of your whatever your objects are, your notebooks, your DBT projects, whatever else, but also helps in the deployment. In this case, I'm actually running a couple SQL queries. There's a few ways to do this. You can actually also, there's notebook commands directly in Snowflake CLI that you could call. But what I wanted to show here was how we can call that same script. So if we remember back, let me just quickly flip back here. Remember back in our 00 notebook at the very beginning, here in step 4, we ran this execute immediate from command and we passed dev and dev. Well, we're going to use this exact same script in our production pipeline, but this time we're going to pass prod and main, so the production environment details. So same script, but now we're using it to deploy our production notebook as well. So that's all this does. Is, like I said, pretty simple. But if we actually look now at the output, so let's go into GitHub Actions. And here's the request that I just submitted. And it completed successfully while I was going through that. You can see that in the deploy notebooks command, it ran those two commands. Here was the execute immediate. And it went through and actually created those 2 prod notebooks. So now if I flip back, like you'd expect, we should see, let's actually go into this one. We should see if we refresh our thing here that in our prod schema, let's refresh here. Oh, we don't, okay, we actually have not created the objects yet. That's good. So we should see nothing here, but we should see in our notebooks 2 notebooks. So there we go. Now there's prod versions of our 2 notebooks. So those are there. Let's actually schedule those. So if we go back to our 0, start here notebook, we're going to go down to where we deployed our tasks before, and we're going to run this again. The thing we're going to change, though, is we're going to change where it says schema name, comment out dev schema, uncomment the prod schema, which means we're going to basically deploy into our prod environment and then run all the cells again. So with that, now we've actually created, let's flip back. We've actually now created all of those tasks. So if we flip back to Horizon Catalog and look at the Database Explorer and open up the demo database, prod schema, we're going to see the tasks here. So we've now deployed prod version of our tasks. And like we did before, let's go into the graph and let's execute. And now this is running the prod version of our DAG. And this will just take a second. This will go through and run those, like we talked about, those 2 notebooks. And you know the flow by now. We're going to ingest the Excel files first. And then we're going to, and you can see that's actually executing at the moment. And once that's finished, that one succeeded just now. We're going to run the load daily CD metrics job. And again, you can see that's executing. This will, again, just take a second to run. But we've actually deployed a completely separate version of the notebooks, of the tasks, and are executing this. And there it is. It succeeded. And now if we're to refresh here, you're going to see underneath the prod schema, we'll see the tables show up. There they are. And now we have the 3 tables here as well in our production. So I've shown here how to do this with using one database with a dev schema and a prod schema. But this would work the same if you just tweak a few things, but you could do this into multiple different databases. You could even apply this across different Snowflake accounts. However you have your Snowflake infrastructure set up, we can support doing it the way you have it set up. And let me show you real quick. In here, let's go back to GitHub. Let's go back to the repository. I have a script also in the repository that you can leverage, which is called deploy task DAG. And it's essentially the same code that you had in the notebook for deploying the task DAG, but in a Python script. So this could be run, you could potentially run this as part of your deployment pipeline as well, so that you could deploy the notebooks and the tasks at the same time. So it's just a little help there for you to do that. All right, so let's go back. With that, we've made it through the steps of the quick start. So we've gone through all the way from ingesting data, setting up a data share, accessing weather data that we didn't have to ingest, to loading, to aggregating and joining and transforming that data. Then we scheduled it with tasks. We were able to automatically deploy those through Python. And then we had an end-to-end deployment where we were able to actually deploy the entire thing through an automated GitHub Actions pipeline. So hopefully that's helpful. Like I said, it gives you all the tools that you need to do this on your own. There's an additional step here, step 10, that you can run through to actually tear down just basically delete the database and the share and things that you were using. So you're welcome to get to that if you'd like. So one last thing to cover, and that's our bootcamp quiz. This quiz is 10 questions, should not take you very long. And if you pass it with an 80% or better, you'll get a badge, and you can see that here, that you can post on social media to show off that you've completed this course and that you have up-leveled your skills with data engineering on Snowflake. So you'll have until November 30th. You'll see the link and the QR code here on the slide that you can use. So please finish it. You'll have 2 tries to pass it. And if you have any problems, there's an email address here that you can reach out to as well to ask questions or raise any issues. So good luck. Hopefully you'll pass, and I look forward to seeing all the badges online.